Hi, my name is Amy Silverman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Commission on Sport Management Accreditation, or COSMA. I'm here today with two faculty members from the College of Applied Studies at Wichita State University to talk about integrating diversity initiatives at the university, college, and degree program levels. So today we're live streaming on a number of social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And this session will be recorded for asynchronous viewing. And this is the second in a series that was thought up by a somewhat informal group of administrators, mostly deans, who are also or used to be sport management faculty. So I'd like to start with the two presenters introducing themselves. So Mark, would you please introduce yourself and let us know your titles?
You bet. Thank you again for all the folks putting this together. Anyway, my name is Mark Vermillion, and yes, there are a number of titles, so I'll just kind of roll through them here quickly. We have the Interim Associate Dean for the College of Applied Studies here at WSU, also the Chair for the Department of Sport Management, and then I'm also the Program Director for Organizational Leadership and Learning.
Great. It's so great to have you here. And we also have Dr. Bobby Berry, who also has a number of titles. So Bobby, if you would please introduce yourself too, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Once again, thanks for having me. My name is Bobby Berry, and I am an assistant professor in the Department of Sport Management. I'm also the director of the FUSE, which is an outreach initiative here in the college, in addition to being a faculty fellow for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion here on campus. And then lastly, overseeing the partnerships that we have with our Organizational Leadership and Learning degree program.
Great. Well, I'm sure we will get into some of what the FUSE is and some other parts of your role. So let's start by helping us, myself, and our audience to define for you all what inclusive excellence is. How does the College of Applied Studies define this?
Yeah, so I might actually walk it back, maybe even one step. So inclusive excellence actually is, a phrase that's taking hold more and more in higher education. But for us, that really was connected with the strategic planning process that was undertaken here at WSU a number of years ago. Bobby and I and a couple of other sport management folks were actually, we were lucky enough to be a part of that process, really. And what that was looking at, from a university kind of institutional point of view, what could we do to connect our everyday work with our strategies moving forward? And so we originally, we engaged with 300 folks, whether it's faculty, staff, students, community partners, practitioners. And so what we did was we really developed and we refreshed our strategic plan, which included reworking the vision statement, but then also kind of taking that we had 7 strategic goals for the university, and we kind of pulled it down to 5. And that's really where inclusive excellence comes from for us. And inclusive excellence, if we just kind of, reading the actual goal, is we want to be a campus that reflects and promotes in all community members the evolving diversity of society. And this is really important to us here at Wichita State, not just to take this as an amorphous, abstract idea, but really kind of institutionalize it so that we can measure it. And that's where we develop these number of objectives that are associated with each goal. And so some of the objectives that are really connected to today's conversation and really help us in the College of Applied Studies and within sport management to connect with inclusive excellence was there was an objective that was looking at developing opportunities for faculty, staff, students as a way to kind of voice their concerns and their needs, because we really wanted to connect with and kind of enrich the campus culture here, but also, and this is really more particular to some of the work and some of the discussion we'll get into now, with to continuously evaluate and enhance or tweak or connect with the curriculum here at WSU, especially centered on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging content. So that's really what inclusive excellence does for us here at Wichita State. And then that kind of trickles down to some of the other units on campus.
Yeah. Bobby, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think one of the things that we've really taken and to the forefront is just making sure that when we talk about inclusive excellence as an institution, how are we living into that in all of the other units and areas on our campus? And so I think that really laid the groundwork for not only that, but a level of accountability to really make sure that when we're talking about inclusive excellence, you can have a diverse group of folks or a diverse institution, but that does not mean that it's an inclusive environment, and vice versa. And so I
Right.
think one of the things that we've worked really diligently about is really trying to make sure that we're really living into that and really thinking about all the students that we serve here.
Can you talk more about what that accountability looks like? And, when you talk about strategic planning, I assume there are metrics and benchmarks, but maybe that has some other qualitative elements too. So let me know.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that when you're trying to balance, excuse me, the quantitative and the qualitative, we have a number of dashboards here at Wichita State that we have an office, a unit on campus that's really starts to highlight and elevate community engagement, how that's connected with strategic planning and those types of things. And so they do a great job of collecting data and providing those dashboards and things like that. But really, to Bobby's point, what we kind of the next step and what's important for us as a college and for a program and some of the other types of work that we're involved with, whether it's different student affairs type entities, things like that, is to really start connecting with people to take inclusive excellence and campus culture and student centeredness and all these things and really bring them together in a humanistic way. Because I'm a quantitative person, so I love a good dashboard, love a good pie chart, bar chart, something like that. But it doesn't really get at the heart of that kind of student experience, and that's really when Bobby was talking about that, it's really about connecting those needs and what people are seeing every single day, what they need in their life, so they can be successful and kind of moving that forward.
And one of the things that we do a lot, I think we do a lot of this on a lot of campuses, is surveys and really making sure how are students perceiving the work that we're doing. And one of the things that we try really to do here in our program is really to touch base with our students and provide a lot of touch points so we can really assess how we are moving the needle when we talk about inclusive excellence within our college, and whether that's with Mark and myself doing interviews with students or having opportunities where we're really evaluating as a department if the things that we're including and incorporating in our classes, is that relevant, is it timely, how are our students responding, are we creating new classes to provide the opportunity with our students to give us feedback. Mark and I, for the first time, are teaching a critical sports studies class this semester. And some of these concepts we've embedded into our class about really having really intentional conversation about how our students are adjusting and what are they doing to give back to this sport industry. And what does that look like? And are they thinking about the many people that this industry serves? Because sport is a very diverse industry that meets a lot of different people, and even folks who are not athletes, right? And it goes a lot deeper than that. So that's one thing that we also try to do, is from an accountability standpoint, is we try our best to not only walk the walk, but talk the talk.
Right.
I might jump in here real quick, Heather, and Bobby brings up a really good point about, listening to the constituents and the stakeholders, and students are a huge one. And we had a number of students that came to us and they were like, look, we want more of this content. We want it in our classes. We want more degree programs. And this was not just in sport management, although we did have that. But this was also kind of university wide. And that actually manifested itself in a new minor here in the Department of Sport Management, Diversity and Sport Studies. And that's where that critical sport studies class kind of really connects in with the curriculum, is because students wanted that content. And then we had students that put together a registered student organization because they wanted to be a change agent for diversity, equity, inclusion, and those types of things, not just on campus, but their ultimate goal was to really start to leave a legacy and leave an impact on the sport industry.
Yeah, it sounds like you have multiple places that you get information from, so you can understand what decisions to make about what initiatives to take on. So if you could describe maybe what that decision-making process looks like. You have a little bit, but talk about it from maybe all directions. You're talking a lot about the student response, which is also, very important. So where else, what else is impacting those decisions?
I think one of the things, and I'll jump in here right really quickly is that even within our OLL degree, which is our Organizational Leadership and Learning degree that Mark has just so passionately spearheaded over the last 3 years about how do we find ways to really move the needle forward. And so within that, we have a partnership alliance. And we also have a committee of folks that we meet with underneath the sport management umbrella as well. So we're able to really have those conversations with our stakeholders about what are you needing from us as an industry, and how can we better prepare our students to come to you, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that we've worked really hard to do, and that feedback and those conversations help us to make better decisions as a department. And
Mhm.
one of the things with Mark being such a phenomenal leader, we have these intentional conversations as a group, as a department, right?
Right.
We think about all the diverse backgrounds and experiences that we have. We think about the people that we engage with, some of the nonprofits, some of the industry folks that we engage with, and what are they saying? How are we adjusting? What experiences can we bring? In addition to, I mean, even as a sport management department, we have Zoom happy hours where we're able to connect with
Yeah.
other industry folks who have graduated and moved on, and what are they seeing in their industries in real time. So I think all of these things collectively we utilize to help us make better decisions.
Mark, do you
Yeah, I
have
might jump in
anything?
here about the decision-making process as well. Is yeah, and Bobby talked a lot about we need to listen to our stakeholders. We need to be accountable to those stakeholders. And this is kind of where as someone who did not necessarily in terms of academic training, I wasn't, this kind of outcomes assessment stuff is fairly new to me. And it was through Cosmo that I learned kind of this whole idea of the OEGs and the SOLs and being able to actually connect. I mean, we hear a lot about data-driven decision-making, and it's easy to talk about it. It's another thing to actually do it. And
Right.
so every year, obviously with the annual reporting, you go through an auditing process where you have to be honest with yourself. What have you done? What did you say you were going to do? What did you actually accomplish? And to what level of success based upon the metrics that you have. And we were really lucky enough that, as we started kind of thinking about the decision-making process, we had inclusive excellence, which was at the university level, but then that matriculated down to our College of Applied Studies level. And we happened to have one Dr. Bobby Berry, who is head of our diversity committee at the college level. And this committee took it upon itself to really kind of lead the charge for an entire college to start thinking about how do we make decisions. And that really kind of influenced a lot of the curricula. It's going to influence faculty and staff. It's going to eventually have an impact on students, but it's really about, looking and being honest and kind of holding a mirror up to yourself and be like, what are we doing? How are we doing it? Why are we doing it? And I don't know, Bobby, if you might want to talk a little bit about some of the work that you were able to spearhead with the diversity committee and the curricular evaluation.
Absolutely. And so we have these conversations about that also started from the data that we received from our institution and from our program, that our students did a climate survey about a year and a half ago and specifically said, we want more diversity content in our courses and classes. And for me, as an individual who has gone to this institution, it was really necessary for me to take heed to some of that information and not necessarily feel like our students should have to go to other programs to receive diversity related content when they could be receiving it right here in our own program. And we created a diversity and sport management class. So I started teaching that last year in the midst of a pandemic, and thought once again it was necessary and timely. So we took this to the leadership team. So at that time, I was chairing the diversity committee, and I said, this is what our students were saying, right? Now, we as a program in sport management, we're already making these changes, but that was just validation when we got some of this data from our college and our institution. Okay, we're going in the right direction clearly. So bringing that to the college as a whole and being able to have that conversation about what would this look like. So where we wanted to start was at least being able to do an evaluation on what is currently being done, because the programs within the college are so diverse. We have teacher education, we have physical, we have PE, And we have sport management in addition to athletic training and performance studies, exercise science, all of that stuff. So it's such a diverse group.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to make sure that people felt there was ownership of how they articulate diversity related content in their courses. And so what we wanted to do is to be able to do an evaluation and or allow each program to do their own internal evaluation, bring that back to this body. So once again, I think the key to any type of diversity work is accountability. It's one thing to say you're doing it, but how are you doing it? And what can we learn from each other? Because I think ultimately that is what this is about as well.
Yeah.
So we had full support from our leadership team. We had full support from our faculty when we took a vote as well. And so now we're in that process of being able to really evaluate that. And as a committee, we even hosted a professional development session to provide people the opportunity to ask questions, to share resources, to provide a rubric. So we didn't want people to feel like they were left on this ocean, by themselves. We really wanted to make sure that we provided them with the tools to equip them to be successful in this process.
So that is the $1 million question. How do you know if you're successful? So if you can talk in generalities, but also maybe a few specifics about what some of those metrics are, just because I know our audience is really interested in best practices, and perhaps that's exactly what you're doing, or better practices.
Well, I don't know about better practices, so we'll touch in that. One of the things, so again, for me, so learning about outcomes assessment and really kind of connecting all of those ideas together. The annual reporting process, extremely, extremely important for me and then for us as a program. So one of the things we tried to do is, so we had this sort of curricular audit that we do, and that's kind of, that was really the recommendation from the diversity committee here in the college, was to, hold that mirror up in front of yourself and be like, well, what are you all doing? And so for us, in terms of kind of answering the question about metrics and things like that, we actually took this diversity self-study and incorporated it into our assessment plan. And a lot of this is kind of based off of, again, this idea of accountability. So we are going to conduct the annual, and we're going to do it annually, sort of diversity self-study to look at everything, kind of gauge and measure where we are. And we're going to report that work. And we have a nice little report template and those types of things that's loosely based off of our program reviews that we do here at the university and here in the state of Kansas. And we're going to, I will complete that as the accreditation officer with input from all faculty, staff, and students. And then we're going to present that to our advisory council. Okay, so that's one mechanism, because we really want to directly involve and connect with the practitioner partners, because that's another thing is, yes, we're in higher education, but our discipline and how we do our work is extremely applied. And I mean that in the best possible way. And so that means that our accountability is to, a larger, wider audience. And then the other thing that we do is, so we have, I actually embedded, we have the OEG #2 and things like that. And so we actually made this diversity self-study one of our measures so that we can engage with that information. We report it to the advisory council, but then we're going to report it in our annual reporting process, because that's going to be important. So our metrics are, looking at that report, and faculty, staff, and then the advisory council have to sign off, and they have to provide best practices or provide input. Because, as we talk a lot about closing the loop, right? So data-driven decision-making, closing that loop. So we take information from our students and our practitioners, and then we try to implement it moving forward. And so that's kind of, it's in alignment in terms of how we measure metrics-wise a lot of the other outcomes assessment processes and procedures and things like that, especially within our OEGs.
Right. And OEGs are operational effectiveness goals, just for anybody who doesn't know. And it is really to measure some kind of success in any goal that the program level, the degree program, wants to put forth. So there are no prescriptions about what those need to be. So this is where Wichita State can say they want diversity, equity, and inclusion goals and measure those. Bobby, do you have some other comments?
And I think the important thing in addition to is that Mark said we were evaluating this annually. And I think that's very important, because as we know, diversity is ever evolving. And so I think this was another way of holding ourselves accountable for assessing these things on an annual basis, that we're continuously taking into consideration how society is changing, how our students are changing, and not to mention, these are the goals of our institution, and these are also a core value. Diversity is a core value for our college as well, and that is something that we collectively agreed upon as a faculty and a staff. And so once again, if this is a core value, we need to make sure that we're really living into this the way that we say we value it. So that was another reason behind us making sure that we assess this annually.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I might pop in here again real quick. I probably should have connected all this stuff a little bit better, but and it was important for us to take this sort of curricular evaluation, this diversity self-study, but we connect it with some of the other OEG measures. So whether it's we tend to survey our employers, we survey our alumni for both programs, graduate and undergraduate programs, and so it's really, and then connecting with university data. We have a pretty robust Office of Planning Analysis that feeds us a lot of data and those types of things. So that it's really part of this larger process of telling the story of, what is diversity? How is it not just instituted within our program, but then also how is it kind of influencing the different tiers of stakeholders that we have associated with the programs?
Right. So you have talked a little bit about how some of the Cosmo processes have helped facilitate this for you. And certainly Cosmo is not prescriptive. So you have chosen this as a focus. So can you talk a little bit more about any other aspects of the Cosmo accreditation process that have helped you? And then I'm also curious about how other colleges on your campus, what are they doing? Are you a model? Is someone else a model and you've adopted some of what they've done? What's going on sort of campus wide?
Yeah, I might address the first part of that, and then I can kick it over to Bobby to really talk about kind of what's going on university wide. But what the thing about Cosmo is, like you said, so it's structured, but it's not prescriptive and prohibitive in terms of how you do things. It doesn't tell you they have to do this, this, and this, X, Y, and Z, A, B, C, that type of thing. It really, but it provides, I sort of use it, it's a horrible analogy, so bear with me here, but when you go bowling, you put the bumpers so that you don't throw a gutter ball. That to some extent, I am adept at throwing a gutter ball, especially when it would come to outcomes assessment. So what Cosmo was able to do is kind of put those bumpers on there for me to kind of to help me understand, help me learn, help me grow within the process of really kind of walking through that process of, okay, here's a goal, and goals are great, but goals don't need to be living on paper. Right? They need to be somehow implemented every single day. And that's really what Cosmo allowed us to do it has enough structure so that we can get a sense for what we need to do, how we need to do it. It provides, whether it's, the self-study, whether it's reaffirmation of accreditation, all those different types of things. So you have kind of a natural story arc that is there. And then there's a lot of support mechanisms, both from you, Heather, and what kind of is available in Cosmo, but then also at the conferences. Like I think we don't want to. Sometimes I think we overlook, that conferences really are a place where you can get ideas, and where as you're walking to a buffet or something like that, you're chatting with someone. And the next thing you know, you're like, what, that's a really good idea. I never really approached or thought about trying to measure something in that particular way. So these are some of the things that Cosmo has really helped me in terms of kind of growing and trying to tweak an assessment plan here and there. It's something that was, as I ascended to this position, it was in place, and Clay had done a great job. In fact, we've done a great job of putting all this stuff together. So my job really was to kind of skip the catamaran and not screw this up, and try to make a few little changes here and there. And that's really what Cosmo provided us, was the tools necessary. It gave some templates, and it gave resources where we could reach out, where we had kind of a safe space to question things, and then layer on the expertise of how we can try to take this assessment practice and really embed it into the culture. And that's something I think we've been pretty successful. Not to toot our own horn too much, we've been pretty successful in incorporating an organizational that's built on the humanistic aspect of engaging and connecting, but then also being able to have the outcomes assessment, the quantitative data, and really being able to tell a holistic story.
And as far as from the university lens, I think one of the things that we've tried to do a great job within our college is to really make sure that these conversations are always ongoing when we're talking about diversity and inclusive excellence. And so being able to have those touch points and that reach across campus, I sit on the President's Diversity Council, as I said earlier. I'm a faculty fellow in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. I'm co-chairing our equity task force at the university. So being able to be in a lot of these different places and spaces to really get a pulse on what our students are saying they need, what our institution is doing, our current policies, our current practices, what does the culture look like, what are some routines that we fall into. And so for me, being able to have that reach, and then our college leadership and our deans being really intentional about having these conversations at our college meetings so that our faculty and staff know what is going on our campus. I think that's one of the things that our college, and not to throw anyone else out there, but I think I've heard that is something that our college does very well, is to make sure that these conversations are being had on a monthly basis at our college meeting. And I think with that being the type of culture that we've created about having these conversations, especially amongst our leadership, it puts us at the forefront to be able to execute and to intentionally to try steer our culture and our practices in the best way possible. And so our university, obviously we've undergone leadership, a transition of leadership. And I think with our current president, Dr. Muma, I think, obviously diversity has been a heightened level of intentionality at our institution. The faces within our leadership structure are looking different than they used to.
Right.
And so I think once again, that is setting the tone for what we hope is a series of ongoing changes about really elevating these conversations in all spaces on this campus.
Yeah, and I think the complexity of this, whatever the success is really interesting. That it might be that success is having monthly conversations, that it is a topic that can be addressed at any time. It is just a part of our lives and our daily activities. So it's not, something that you talk about only at the, DEI committee meetings or only once a year when you're looking at some data. So I think that sounds very valuable, and it's almost like a different type of metric. And I'm not sure if that's part of your intentionality of what you're doing. So please tell me if I'm wrong. But it sounds like it's on there are multiple levels of things going on at the same time.
Absolutely.
So,
and I think one of the things that we have to also just be mindful of is that if we're not talking about it regularly, that's how we get comfortable.
Right.
And what was relevant in 2020 is not going to be relevant in 2021. I mean, the conversations that we were having as a nation, as an industry, right, last summer and the summer before looked very differently than conversations we were ever having.
Right.
And I think, when we're talking about growing in this industry, diversity is not just a black or white thing. Last year, we were really intentional about how do we elevate the voices of our female students in our sport management programs, right? So once again, diversity is ever evolving. And if you really take the time to look at it, there's a lot of gaps when we talk about equity and diversity in this industry. And I want our students, and we want our students to be at the forefront of being comfortable with having these conversations. It's one thing to have them, but it's another thing to be comfortable having them, and then to also be a part of the solution and the change going forward.
Yeah.
And Heather, in regards to success, I think that comfort is an interesting idea, because if we do this annual report, and if I feel like I can just sort of copy and paste from last year and the year before and the year before, then we are too comfortable. And that means that we're probably not engaging in the spaces either intentionally enough or in regular ways, or we're not listening to folks. Because I think one of the successes, and this is going to be a little strange sounding, but one of the successes for us is going to be every year to do that report and be like, oh, we need to keep doing some things here, and here, bringing those action items kind of to the forefront of everything that we do. And I just borrowed heavily that idea from Cosmo, because it's about looking and saying, oh, need to keep on growing here. So.
Right. Well, one of the things I tell people about the annual report, which some people really hate, is that you can collect your data, but if you don't do anything with it, or if you don't think about what it means, it doesn't really matter that you have a bunch of data. So that part is one element. And then of course, the sections that you're talking about where you're analyzing what it means, even measures that you've been successful on, or you've met, or you've exceeded. What does that mean? Does that mean everything is fine and you are comfortable and you can sit back, or does it actually mean success, but what comes next? What's a deeper layer or another element that could be talked about or changed? So I think that at least I got a little bit of feedback when I have been advertising the session that I think the interest is that folks want to know, what can I do on my campus? How can I replicate a little bit of what you're doing? And I know that it can vary widely from college to college, campus to campus. So, that's the tricky part. But are there any broad lessons that you could share that could be utilized by other faculty on other campuses?
I think to get more engaged with our students, right? I think as a faculty member, making sure that I'm consistently checking in with my students and kind of seeing how they're responding to what we're doing, right? And I think one of the things that we've tried is to make sure that our sport management program is ever evolving, being able to create new classes to respond to the needs of our students. So me implementing this diversity in sport management class, and Mark and I creating this critical sports studies class, and saying this is in response to what our students are saying, but we wouldn't have known that if we didn't ask, right? Doing research. We're getting ready to start this project that we're so excited about, that specifically is looking at the Black student athlete experience, specifically those who are sport management majors. So once again, creating those touch points, and it looks different everywhere. I think that's the beauty of it, right? It's how do you take this notion of just simply checking in, having conversations, and being accountable. And that can look different in every program, but ultimately that is at the root of what we do. We talk about these core values, and every organization within the sport industry and every organization in general has a mission statement. We have core values. But once again, what is it? And do we know about it? And are we living into them? And I think sometimes if we do that level of self-reflection, I think we'll start to really see people being a little bit more intentional about the work that they're doing, intentional about how they engage, intentional about the way in which they respond to the needs of their students. So I think that is a lesson that we've learned, that I think we've been fairly successful in, is being able to feel like our students know us and that we know them. So I think for me, that would be a lesson that we've learned, that I think if folks can definitely translate that to wherever they are.
Yeah.
And I think another thing is, and this is the beautiful thing about our discipline or related disciplines, is we are connected to not just students, but also the practitioners. And we call them practitioner partners because they truly are. And being able to engage them, because as Bobby was discussing, the sport industry has been having these conversations, and it's going to change. So connecting with those folks, seeing what you're going to find individuals that want to have those discussions that maybe are not necessarily on your campus. They are maybe working with your student interns or your practicum students and those types of things. So that's another thing is, almost all these sport management programs that I know of, they have those engagements. Take advantage of those networks, have those conversations. And then the other thing is that if folks are associated with Cosmo, then the tools, the templates, all of those things are there for being able to have not just a conversation, but to implement it. And that was the thing is, so if Bobby comes to me and we have a conversation, my job is to listen, to be open to that, and then say, okay, how can we take some of the frameworks and things like that and start to use those as a tool? If I need to dig a hole, I'm going to go and find a shovel. So this is one of the first tools that I go to when I start thinking about how can we start to implement programmatic change. And so I think that's going to look different for every single program, department, college, university, whatever it is, but realize that a lot of this stuff that we need to be successful, a lot of those tools are already around, and so are the people. And the people, as Bobby said, you just need to have intentional conversations with them. people are saying these things. It's really going to be up to us to listen to it and then try to take that next step and start to implement these things programmatically.
I think another thing I'll throw in there really quickly is that, our students wanted to be a part of the change. They wanted to be a part of the conversation. And that's how we had a student organization that came to form called Champs. And really they were being champions of elevating and having conversations and hopefully being the change of diversity, equity, inclusion in the sport industry. And so this group of students came together and said, we want to be a part of this. And these students hit the ground running, had an extremely successful year, won 6 awards from our institution, and not just sport management. They won this at the university level because of the work that they did. I mean, they hosted a diversity in sport week and really looked at a women in sport week. And they were a part of a lot of these really great conversations that we had on this campus over the last year. I decided, they came to me with this idea and I was like, hey, let's do it. And so underneath the umbrella of the Fuge, which once again is an outreach initiative for the college, where we specifically want to be able to be that touch point and that link between our college, our partners, our students, our faculty and staff. What is a way that we can intentionally be that bridge and that connector to all these different groups? And so I decided to oversee them, and it's just been real impactful for not only me, but I think for them to be able to work side by side with their faculty members and to do things that are going to benefit the industry that they're going into. And so I'm really excited. And I think if we listen to our students, because once again, like Mark said, they're saying these things, I think we'll start to see a more unified effort towards inclusive excellence as a whole.
Very interesting. And so if anyone has any questions that are out there in the social media verse, we will address them and they will be put up on our screen. But in the meantime, is there anything that you did that you didn't do well? Maybe it didn't fail, but it was a good first step. Maybe you got some criticism or some feedback on what happened. I'm interested to hear about that as well, and what you think went wrong, or if we want to put that harsh of a word on it, just what happened.
I think COVID went wrong. I think,
yes,
that prevented us from, having the high level of engagement that we once were used to. I think it caused us to reevaluate how we implement certain things, timing. And so I think Mark will probably co-sign this, we were in such a great stride prior to the pandemic. I mean, having numbers and high level of engagement from our students like we've never seen before. Our initiatives were being cranked out left and right. Faculty were engaged, and it was like, pause. No one can see each other, right? And so in taking all of that and translating to a virtual space, we found to be very challenging for our group of students. I mean, I think some areas that worked well, but for us, I think that was kind of a roadblock. So I think now we're kind of in that process of saying, how do we pivot? How do we take some of the lessons learned during this pandemic? And realistically speaking, we lost some of our momentum, but how do we approach it differently going forward? So I think this has caused us to really reevaluate some things. And I think a lot of people are feeling that probably same sentiment as well.
Yeah. Mark, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think, and that's another thing too, because then that sort of leads to a host of other issues. So if we're dealing with some, pretty impactful programming or whatever it is, and then now you have a large number of people, faculty, staff, students, practitioners as well, that are now dealing with mental health. And that's always been ever present, but recently some things have exacerbated some issues that people are dealing with. So then balancing those, and then still making sure that these conversations, that these types of programs are still elevated and important, even in the midst of extremely busy schedules for folks. And that's always going to be an issue. And so you put out a program, and you have high hopes, and maybe turnout's a little bit lower than you think. But that's one of those things that in terms of the actual metric, strategic planning initiative, we said, hey, we expect 30 to 60 people, and maybe you only have 12, maybe you only have 2. But that doesn't deter us, because, all right, then that means 12 people that were able to engage with the ideas, those types of things. And so I think it's really about trying to balance everything, and in the midst of this massive amount of change, being able to keep this work and these ideas center stage. And that's one of the things that I think our group has done a really good job with, is that these ideas permeate everything, as compared to, yes, we do have a diversity and sport management class, right, but it's not like students take Bobby's class, we check the box, and then we don't ever engage with the idea again. And so it's just making sure that even in the midst of all the stuff going on, that we can keep this stuff elevated and at the top of everything that we do.
Yeah. And to Mark's point, really quickly, this whole, I think we all were faced with these conversations of mental health. And so last year, Mark had a brilliant idea, based off of those conversations and some of the experiences our students were having, to start hosting a mental health and sport week. And so that is something that was really successful last year, and we're gearing up for the second year this November. And so once again, really responding. And now this is something that these are continued conversations that we weren't having, that we're going to be having going forward.
That's great. Combining those two efforts. Absolutely. Is there anything that an accreditor like Cosmo, or even your administration at multiple levels, could do to support you, to not get in your way, I guess, is another type of support. But anything that isn't being done, Cosmo does have a diversity principle. Again, it is very open. We want you to tell us what you're doing. And we are assuming that diversity is something that's woven throughout the curriculum and throughout the other activities that your program has. But, that may not be how it's done, on each campus. So could you talk about any additional support you might need? Or
Yeah, I might just pop in here real quickly. One of the things that's been really nice, and so we went through accreditation, and then we recently reaffirmation of accreditation. And one of the things that process allows is, we know that there's a lot of good people doing a lot of great work, but sometimes resources can be constrained within this fiscal environment of higher education. And so just having Cosmo in and of itself allows us to have the conversation about resources, because if we're trying to be intentional, and if we want to make diversity, equity, inclusive excellence, as we term it here at Wichita State, if we want to make that a priority, then you tend to put resources towards the things that are priorities. Now we want to be careful, because priorities change, but this is a core value, and it's a core value that's built into the university, it's built into the college, and it's built into the department level, and involves our programs. And so Cosmo really highlights that as well. And so if we're going to say that this is something that we do indeed value, maybe I don't have a lot of resources, maybe our group doesn't have a lot of money. That's okay. There's a lot of impactful things that we can do.
Right.
That's low to no cost, but creating the time, space, and place for it. And so, being able to have this sort of informal meeting, whether it's the sport management administrators that get together and talk once a month, whether it's the Cosmo conference, or even things like this, it's pretty interesting to see how many great ideas you can get from just listening to the people that are around you. Like my job is to listen to the people that are far smarter than me, because they're going to tell you what the answers are. I just kind of need to put them together and help us try to move the entire thing forward.
I would completely co-sign everything that Mark just said. I think having these opportunities for people to hear, having these opportunities to have these conversations, in the place and space of conferences, I always think are beneficial, because ultimately we're all in this together, right? It's not like Wichita State or another institution are having completely separate experiences. These experiences are probably overlapping in a lot of different places across this country, right? And at least the students in which we're serving are having a lot of these experiences, or wanting a lot of these same things to change in their programs. So I think providing us with the opportunity and continuing to provide us with the opportunity to have these conversations, I think it is very beneficial. And at least for me, I love having these conversations, because I think no matter who you are and what walk you're walking, there's always something to learn.
Yes. Yes. I have heard we have a couple of questions, so I hope they pop up on the screen so that I know what they are. Aha. Okay. Dr. Darlene Kluka, who I will say has been both on the board of commissioners for COSMA, which is the accrediting body decision-making, or accreditation decision-making body, and the board of directors, which works on our operational processes. She's asking, how does what you are discussing fit into faculty performance? Excellent question. And what are the motivating factors for faculty to buy into this?
It's a great question, because we can have conversations, but we need to contextualize everything. Time is money. People have their job responsibilities and things like that. So one of the things I will say, one of the advantages, kind of the ace up the sleeve, if you will, that we have here at WSU is that we operate off of what they call the Uniscope model. And for those that aren't familiar, it's not necessarily just a 40-40-20 research, teaching, service kind of thing. It's a multi-dimensional view of scholarships, the scholarship of research, the scholarship of teaching, the scholarship of service. And so what faculty are able to do is some of this work that oftentimes maybe historically would be sort of categorized as just sort of service, which is the least amount perhaps of many role descriptions and things like that. We're actually able to maximize it, because here at WSU, the Uniscope model is about measuring, quantifying impact. And that can happen in a variety of different ways. And so, that was one of the ways we were able to get faculty to buy in so quickly, especially here. I'll let Bobby talk at the college level with the diversity committee and some of the work there. But in the department level, that's one of the things that we were able to do. People are doing this work. It fits nicely with that Uniscope model. And in reality, and I'll call a spade here, we're a small faculty. We're not a huge department. So, having like-minded folks that kind of want to feed off of that energy and feed off of pitching in and kind of the typical team effort type of thing, that was fairly easy to do at the department level. But Bobby, maybe have a slightly different view on some of the things at the college level.
Yeah, I think times are changing. And what I mean by that is no longer is it the sole responsibility of the Office of Admissions and or student affairs to have students in the classroom, right? At the end of the day, when I meet with Mark, or when I meet with our leadership, and we're looking at headcount and we're looking at enrollment numbers, ultimately some of that falls on, okay, Bobby, what are you doing, right? And so I think ultimately when we talk about having these SPTE evaluations and taking heed to what some of the students are saying, and ultimately if we talk about, we want to grow our classes or diversify our student body, then we might have to reevaluate the approach in which we have. So if we rely on other people to do that, and you slowly are not seeing any of those changes, God forbid, your class doesn't make quota, then what, right? And before we get to that point of having those conversations, I think once again, we need to be really intentional. So if I'm sitting here as a faculty member and I'm having a conversation with a female student who says, I would love to see more women in my classes, or I'm one of 3, and I want to feel more inclusive and included in these conversations, then to me personally, having that conversation and saying, Mark, what can we do to better serve our female students, or make sure that they feel comfortable with choosing this as a major? What does that look like? And I think ultimately, as we progress and we look at things differently, I think that sometimes is an incentive for some of our faculty as well. Is that you want to have a greater reach? Okay, well then we have to be more intentional, because Office of Admissions doesn't know what you know about your discipline. They're not in your classrooms. So ultimately, it's for me to be able to convey that story as well.
Yeah, it sounds like the onus falls on you to some degree to really know your students best, as you're saying, is not only important, but you are interested in checking in constantly and then responding to those needs. And then an impact could be greater enrollment of students in the program, or taking different classes, or a number of different metrics that then benefits the university as a whole. So that's an interesting interplay between those different offices you're talking about that maybe traditionally were in charge of your enrollment, and now maybe it's a little more balanced.
And I also think there's, lots of faculty members have a natural inclination to want to learn. I mean, that's really kind of the basis, if you will, of the scholarship of research activity that so many people are involved with. And, there are a lot of people that do research that it's not even necessarily part of their job. It's something, they want to move forward this idea of the discipline and having productive conversations in a sport management classroom and those types of things. And that's the other thing too, is that, for example, having a mentor program so that younger faculty members, younger in their career, are, as they matriculate into the classroom and they're working and they have a lot of ideas, turn that into a research project. One of the things about being in the program, being here at WSU for a while, my job is to help mentor. My job is to help folks become more efficient. So that work that you're doing, that intentional engagement in the classroom with those student athletes, with those sport management students, that can be, contextualized into a research project. So now maybe you have folks that are able to do this work because they want to have the engagement, but then now they can also translate that into a metric that's going to impact their personal career moving forward. So kind of having those both parallel lanes is always kind of nice.
Yeah, we do have kind of a follow-up question that we have been talking about. Are you assisting in the recruitment of students? Is that happening? Maybe intentionally, non-intentionally?
Yeah, I mean, we have a recruitment and retention committee within the college that has been around for many years. And what that looks like is at one point, our institution would then have faculty members who would be a faculty fellow of recruitment, a faculty fellow of retention. And those individuals would be part of at least being able to tell their story and be a part of that recruiting process. So if, our Office of Admissions would go on road shows or go to local high schools, that faculty member could have the opportunity to engage with those students, to have that touch point. That process has been kind of retooled a little bit, but we still have a recruitment retention committee within our college where faculty and staff and students are a part of these conversations of what does it look like to recruit. And I think, as we know, the sport industry has changed so much, and a lot of the opportunities that were provided to our students from an applied learning standpoint has really been halted in a lot of ways. And so once again, I think that has lent itself to us to be more creative. So it's not a must that our faculty are engaged with these recruitment efforts, but I think when we talk about levels of engagement, and once again, a piece of accountability and responsibility, I think a lot of our faculty members, especially within our department, have truly stepped up to be a part of those processes, whether it's providing opportunities for students. We have a group of high school students coming here next week, some sport administration students coming here, and we're going to be hosting them, having mock classes and letting our students engage with them. So that is not necessarily a retention or a recruitment effort, but it could be, right? Because we're still allowing them to see what we do here. They're already invested in our industry by being in a sport administration class. So once again, seeking out those intentional opportunities, because I believe recruitment looks very different now than it used to 5, 10, 15 years ago, right? Even 2 years ago, right? So to answer that question.
Yeah, it seems to me like a big opportunity for faculty. And yes, it puts something else on your plate, but it's almost par for the course for some of the other efforts that you're doing and conversations you're having. So here we have a question from Lawan Hutchinson. Would you say positive matriculation rates are proof that your intentional focus on DEI is working for the students from year to year? Great question. I have that same question. When do you get to see it? What does it look like when you have changed the composition of your student body? And that is about those DEI efforts.
Well, and I think, one of the things, when you're looking at the qualitative sort of humanistic data, and then you have the quantitative data, and what we try to do is balance both of those things out. So yes, as we start to take those quantitative metrics and try to raise those benchmarks or raise different types of categorical comparisons, one of the things that we have been very, very, very intentional about is that doesn't necessarily mean success. That is a part of the process of having these discussions. And, one of the things that we try to do in our assessment processes is, connect with alumni. And so we send out an alumni survey, and we usually get really, really good response. And the same as with the employers, is to not just get students' point of view or look at, kind of institutional data. We need to look at everyone that is a stakeholder with our group to see perceptions and then kind of see where we are in terms of some of these quantitative metrics. I'm the quantitative guy. I will admit to being that, sort of a bias, if you will. And so step one is realizing that I need to surround myself with some folks that want to have those qualitative conversations. And that's where, folks like Bobby that can come in and you start working with students saying, okay, what are your feelings? What is it like to go through that program? And that's where he had, a conversation with a student, and they're like, I want to see more female students in my classes. I'm not necessarily going to get that from a survey. So positive matriculation rates are good things. We need to have those metrics, and we follow from when they enter the program, and then they kind of transverse throughout the entire life course of however long they're going to be here with us. That is good, but that is only a part of the evaluation and auditing process for us.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing that I'll add to that is, once again, I come from a qualitative background, and being able to put a pulse and to check that pulse continuously of our students and our student body specifically. And when we talk about DEI and what does that look like and how does it manifest itself in our programs, because ultimately, if my student feels included, if they feel like there's things that are intentional for them and who they are and the population and the identities in which they subscribe to, and if we're providing opportunities for them to engage in diverse spaces, I think then in turn, if that student and those students have positive experiences, that then lends itself to those positive experiences being relayed to another student, relayed to another student, which will then in turn, hopefully, we see those additional bodies in our classrooms. And I think sometimes it starts there. I think of how many times we've had a positive experience with a restaurant or a particular brand, and we recommend and or suggest it to someone else. And sometimes our students are our best advertisement, right? And so when I think about that, I think those are the two perspectives that we come from. And that's why I love being a part of this program and working with Mark so closely, is because we're able to look at things from very different lenses, even with the identities that we hold, right? And I think even us having a critical sports studies class that we co-teach together, and seeing that representation of these two folks from different backgrounds bringing their expertise to our discipline, that has been great for these students. And we even see classes like that really start to grow in enrollment because of just being a part of this experience where they're having two folks talking about issues from a different perspective that they've never heard before. So I think it looks different.
Yeah.
And I would just real quickly say that, we need to be doing more constantly. And that's where kind of that curricular audit comes in. Where if I can find myself, and this is where everyone else holds me accountable, right? If I create a report and it's falling back on these quantitative metrics constantly with tables, bar charts, and things like that, then we're probably not getting at the root of everything. We're on that surface level, and we don't need to be doing that. And this is where they engage me. And then we say, okay, let's revamp. Let's make sure that we build a structure where we're going to host X number of events per semester and then per year. There's an accountability metrics for that, so that we make sure that we build in that we have to do things, and that having to do things needs to be changed. It needs to be talking to different folks.
Yeah. Well, those are all the questions that we have from the not to be seen audience, but they're out there. Any other final comments or anything you want to say to everybody out there about the work that you do, what you are excited about what you do.
I would just say thank you. This is an opportunity. The more we can have these discussions, it's hard to have honest discussions. And so surround yourself with people that push you, force you to grow, and then they'll be honest to your face. And that's really what I'm looking for. And I think it's helped us kind of put together a culture in the department where we are by no means perfect. But what we try to do is realize that we need to keep trying. And I think as long as we kind of stay on that path, and that's something I'm pretty proud to kind of sign my name off on.
And everybody can be a part of these conversations. I think that's another thing I want to throw out there. I think oftentimes people feel like, well, I don't know what to say. I don't feel comfortable. I don't want to appear as if blank, 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 right? And I think once again, we all have to be a part of the change. And I tell this to my students all the time. We can't always have people who look like us advocating for us. And what I mean by that is, there's been many places and spaces where I have had to advocate for a woman in this industry, and that's okay, right? So you think about the power just from your positionality and your level of access and or your identities and the power that they hold. And it's okay to advocate on behalf of other people, or at least if you're unaware of how to do that, be an ally and have those conversations. Allies are allies every day. You don't get to pick and choose when you want to be an ally. And that's what I ultimately hope people also at least take into consideration as they go forward in this work.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice and philosophical position for sure. Yeah, and thank you so much to both of you for spending the time with me today to have this conversation. I love having these conversations, and we'll have more for sure.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.